Hello, my name is Jason Buck and I'm the Dean of Students at New England College.
Hi, I'm Matt Corey. I'm the Director of Student Conduct here at NEC.
So welcome. Matt and I are here today to present a session called Building Partnerships. And it's a really important session where we'll talk about the ways that the college can work with students' family members and parents to help our students achieve their maximum potential here at the college. I'd like to begin our time together today by referring you to this diagram that's on your screen. When people think about success in college, most people think about the relationship between the student and the institution. And that's obviously really important. But this diagram really acknowledges that there are three important relationships that will help lead to student success. And I want to talk about each of those quickly. The first one is the one I mentioned already. There's an important relationship starting and that will be continued to be built in the future between the college and our students. We have an orientation process in the fall, and we have first-year seminars, and many ways that we connect with and form relationships with students to help them achieve success. I'd like to begin our time together today by referring you to this diagram on your screen. When people think about success in college, they most often think about the ways that a college can help a student, and that's obviously very important. But this diagram really shows that there are three important relationships that we work on maximizing and establishing and utilizing during your student's time here, or if you're the student, for your time here. The first one is on the left side, and this is a relationship that's existed for some time. This is a relationship between a student and their family. For a number of you, this relationship may be changing a bit because you might be moving from home to live on campus, or commuting and being home less than you have been. But this relationship will continue to be vital to your success here as a student. And for parents, the changing relationship may be a challenge for you right now. So we want to talk about that piece while we're here together today. The traditional thought is on the right side of the triangle that there's a relationship being formed between the student and the college, and that's certainly true. And that will begin today, maybe has begun during admissions events, will continue through orientation and the semesters here at the college. And the way we can support and challenge and encourage our students is vital to their success. Now, the bottom of the triangle is one that some people don't think about, and that's the relationship between the college and families and parents. So it's important that we acknowledge that the relationship that exists between families, parents, and their students provides a history and a knowledge that we'll never have as college administrators. So we depend on our students' families and parents to help identify times when the student's struggling and to reach out to us when it might be important to do that. And we also want to give information to parents and families to help them be more educated about what their student's going through. So again, each part of this triangle is very important, and we're here to talk about all those parts today and how you can prepare for your beginning of your college time at NEC or preparing for your student to start here. One of the big changes when we look at how a family and a student can work together concerning their education is the flow of information. So for students who have been in high school, or for families whose student has been in high school, access to information by parents and families has been relatively easy up until this point. If a parent wanted information, they could typically call the school up and get that information quite quickly. When a student begins studies at the post-secondary level at a college or university, that relationship changes. The control of the information shifts to the student. And that's a really big adjustment for some families and for some students. Families that were very involved, very in the loop, and used to that happening really easily may have an adjustment to make. That now they may have to get their student to give permission for us to give information to the family. So Matt and I today will talk about a number of conversations and topics that are important to focus on in this summertime or the wintertime leading up to a new semester. One of the topics is how can that information flow as easily as you want it to, while also giving the student the right to protect their information if they choose to do that. So FERPA is the name of a federal policy, a federal act that governs this. So a number of people have heard about FERPA, but if you haven't, I want to talk about that for a couple of minutes. FERPA, as I said, at a college and university gives the rights of control of information to a student. It gives them rights to review their information with us if they choose to do that. It gives them rights to request to have their information amended or changed if they think it's not accurate. And it also controls to whom we can give that information. So for the most part, unless a student allows us to disclose information, we're not able to do that. We'll talk a little bit later today about sometimes that the government does allow exceptions to that, related to certain kind of policies or matters that happen on campus. But for the most part, a student will have to give us permission to share information with their families. This topic continue and you think about your students or your start at the college. It is important to talk about this, students to talk with their family members, with their parents, to think about expectations. What will your family or your parents want access to? And what kind of information is something that you want to control yourself, that you feel comfortable managing yourself? Maybe reaching out to family when you think you need help, but managing things on yourself and advocating for yourself as much as you can. If parents or families ever have questions about FERPA, or certainly if a student does, they can reach out to our staff, and we have forms that a student can sign that will allow us to share certain information more freely with their parents or their family or someone else that they might identify. So please reach out if you have questions.
As Jason mentioned, with FERPA, there are times where we're restricted in terms of the amount of information that we can share with families. And that can be a frustration at times. But again, you can always ask us questions, and we will do the best we can to make sure you get all the information that you need. What FERPA does not restrict is the flow of information from families to us. So we always look forward to phone calls or emails or discussions with families when folks have information to share with us. Always feel free to pick up the phone or share information with us if you have concerns that you believe we should be in the loop about. We look forward to partnering with families. It's important to make sure that emergency contact information is up to date. We want to make sure that we have the most current information on file. If there ever is an emergency situation, we want to be able to make sure we can reach out. One of the important conversations to have in preparation for coming to college is, who is that emergency contact? And it may feel obvious that most times that would be a family member. That is not always the case. It's not always who a student would choose to have as their emergency contact that's listed in the system. Again, in terms of expectations, an important conversation to have. Make sure there's alignment there. If the student is picturing having someone other than a direct family member, how does that communication flow between the college and the family, between the student and family? And again, just making sure that there's transparency there and folks are in the loop and aware of how that will be negotiated. So a good conversation to have moving forward. But again, we want to make sure we have the most current info, accurate cell phone number, accurate email contact, so that we can reach out if there's an emergency need to make contact with families.
As we start to move into talking about some specific topics, I do want to talk about the exceptions to FERPA that I mentioned before. There are times when the government allows colleges and universities to reach out to families without a student's permission. One of those more typical times would be when a student's involved with a violation of alcohol policy. And certainly in most cases, families want to know about those sort of things. But the government does not make a similar exception for something like a case involving harassment or even a physical altercation. And some people would see those as more serious than having alcohol in a residence hall room. So it's important that parents understand that there are guidelines the government sets, and we are doing our best to negotiate getting support to students, taking care of a situation, and letting parents and families know when we can. But please know that there are times when we're not able to pick up the phone. And it may be a time that we would think, gosh, as a parent, we'd want to know too. But it would be up to your student to share that in those cases. So let's talk about alcohol for a few minutes. And as you can see on the slide, we want to talk about a few things when it comes to alcohol on campus. So for those of you that have watched movies like Animal House or Old School, there are expectations and beliefs about alcohol use on campus that aren't always accurate. So the first thing I want to do is just mention that there are misperceptions. People think that everyone drinks, everyone parties on the weekends, and that's simply not true. We see that both through surveys and information from our students, but also the behavior we see in person. There are students that will experiment with alcohol, that drink alcohol on campus, and there are students that won't. And so it's important that people know that the reality is that it's a choice that some people will make. Some people will do a little bit of experimenting or drinking of alcohol. Some people might do more than that. And our staff are here to make sure that students are being safe, and that if we're concerned about a student's level of behavior, that we're intervening with that. There's always, I think, some level of peer pressure, and sometimes that peer pressure is actually a societal pressure. They've watched movies, they've seen TV shows, and they want to be what they've seen on the screen. And so I think it's important for students that are watching this to realize that you don't have to be like you've seen people act in movies. You should come to campus and be yourself. and not feel pressure to be a certain way. And then you might also feel some peer pressure from students that are here that might want to go off campus to a party or something like that. And I think it's important to think about how you're going to respond to that. If you choose not to drink alcohol or to do it very little, then think about how you respond to peers that might want to encourage you to do more than that. It's an important thing to think about before you start college. I do think, as the slide shows, fitting in can be a pressure, but I think that I know there are students who have fit in with groups that choose not to drink and have found wonderful, strong friendships, different than they might have expected if they watched too many movies about college, but found people that have rich, vibrant social lives that don't involve alcohol. One reality about being here in Henniker is that our local law enforcement is less busy with things that they might be whereas an urban environment in Boston or New York or somewhere like that. So some things might be noticed by the police that might not be noticed back home. So sometimes the police might intervene if they see some people walking down the street with some red cups or with a can or a bottle or something like that, and they're surprised because that might not have caught their attention back home. We are a small town, and I think it's important to know that the police do notice what's going on in town, and there also is a law that's different than some places, focused on what we call internal possession. So students who are underage and might be having alcohol in their system could be arrested or cited for that. So it's important to know that that's the reality here in Henniker. Our police work very closely with us. I think people have a great time here at college. The police don't stifle our social life, but they do watch out for people that aren't being safe. Last thing I wanted to talk about on this topic is our amnesty policy. The most important thing when it comes to alcohol use on campus is that people are safe. And one way we address that is to have a policy that grants amnesty to those who reach out about a friend that they're concerned about, or if they're concerned about themselves. So if a student is with a friend and they're really worried that that friend has consumed too much, they can call for help to campus safety or to somebody from the housing staff. And we will look at that less from a policy perspective, but more from a safety perspective. We'll get help for that person. We'll assess their level of intoxication and get the assistance that we need. And the follow-up will be much more educational and less of what people might call punitive than it might normally be. So the message is that the most important thing is to reach out if you're worried about yourself, your own safety, or the safety of your other students. Most important thing. So that happens several times a year, and we always reach out to those students afterwards and thank them for what we think is an important part of our community, caring for each other.
Let's talk a little bit about marijuana. That's a changing landscape that it's very different for what Jason and I would have experienced when we were in college, when nationwide, state by state, it was illegal across the board. With the landscape shifting, many of the states surrounding us have legalized marijuana use. It is not the case in New Hampshire, and that can be an adjustment, but we want to make sure that folks are fully informed. Marijuana is illegal in the state of New Hampshire, and it's not allowed, obviously, on campus in residence halls regardless of age. Whereas with alcohol, when somebody reaches the age of 21, there are some permissions available on campus. That's not the case with marijuana. So we focus a lot more on education, other ways to relieve stress. If folks are using marijuana as a stress relief or a coping mechanism, we want to make sure that folks are able to relieve their stress in other ways. Again, given that in this state, in the current environment, marijuana is illegal. So important for everybody to know that coming in. I'd like to introduce everybody to an app that's really important for all students. I'd love everybody to download this onto your phones. There's a QR code on the screen. Go ahead and take a picture. That'll get you to the App Store or to Google Play. This app is good for Apple and Android, so multi-use. Incredibly useful tool we have access to. It's called the USAFE US app. And this can help you find help in an emergency situation. It can help you reach out to friends. The Expect Me part of this app, walking along escort type app. It can signal a text message when it's time to leave a situation. Go ahead and download this app, play around with all the different features, and I think you'll find this very useful, hopefully very helpful app, and a great resource tool if there's an emergency situation. I'd like to switch now and take a couple minutes to talk about a complicated subject, and that is sexual conduct and consent. And many of you may have heard of policies and acts such as Title IX VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. There is a lot of information in our student handbook, and that's the go-to resource for students to find information about just about any policy you can think of on campus. But it's important that we talk briefly about these topics, and again, thinking ahead of time before you get to campus, so you're thinking about how you would handle certain situations. So Title IX, it protects people from discrimination based on sex in education programs and activities. And NEC takes a really strong stance against sexual misconduct, dating and domestic violence, stalking. We want everybody to have an enjoyable learning environment that's free from any hassle. And we take a very strong stance against those negative behaviors. We want things to be free from offensive and hostile behavior. So thinking about consent and thinking about sexual assault, also thinking about some stereotypes. The stereotype may be that stranger assaults are the norm. That's the common, somebody jumps out from behind a bush and an assault were to occur. And that is definitely the exception to the rule. More often than not, folks that are survivors of these situations are dealing with an acquaintance situation, somebody that they know. And so, again, thinking ahead of time how to navigate situations, how to have access to an app like USafeUS, which we just talked about, thinking about boundaries, thinking about consent conversations and how those might go. And knowing that there are so many resources on campus and folks that are here with their doors open, ready to talk with folks. Understand that staff and faculty members are what are called mandatory reporters. So that means that we have an obligation if somebody were to share information with us, we would need to share and make sure that we have reported that information as required. But we are here to share resources and let folks know everything that's available to them. And we'll do so in a very supportive, caring way. We want folks to always feel comfortable coming and talking, expressing concerns and sharing when times are difficult so that we can help, again, share resources, serve as advocates, and help folks deal with situations that are troubling to them. On campus, we have a campus safety department that is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. There are folks available for emergency response. Our campus safety officers are available for escorts. So if anybody at any time is feeling unsafe or a little bit trepidatious, campus safety is there to help. So for example, if somebody's parked in a parking lot that feels a little remote to the residence hall, maybe it's dark out, campus safety will be happy to get folks from that lot to their residence hall area and make sure that they're escorted and they feel secure. There are blue light emergency response systems throughout campus. So anywhere folks see a blue light out on campus, get to that location, press the button, it dials directly to dispatch, and they can share what the concern is. Residence hall students, campus safety will help you with lockouts if you should end up unable to get into your residence hall room. Campus safety is also responsible for parking on campus. So asking questions about where to park, what to do if a guest is coming to campus, how to purchase a permit. If you are going to park on campus, they can help with all that information as well. And again, access to a web address on the bottom of the slide there that you can click for more information as well.
Before we move into the last section of our presentation, I do want to just take a pause and think back to what Matt and I have just shared. And I think for students and for families both, there's a lot of information that we're sharing with you, and it might be hard to keep it all straight. There's one message I want to reinforce is that there are so many supports and resources here. Maybe so many that it might be hard to remember them all after watching this presentation. So I ask you to always know where the link to the student handbook is, which has a lot of important information. You can watch this presentation again if you wanted to kind of refresh and reinforce what you've seen. Or please reach out to any of our staff and let them know what you're looking for assistance with, and they can find the right person for you. In most cases, the topics that we've talked about may have 3 or 4 offices that are here to provide assistance and different kinds of support. And that's true with most issues here on campus. So there's no shortage of help, but it may take a while to learn about that help. So if you're a new student, if you're a family member, parent of a new student, and you want to learn more about things, again, check our resources, read our handbook, and reach out to our staff if you have any questions. But one thing that we know is that the transition period of the first 6 weeks or so is really critical for student success. And this is true for people who are traditional age, coming from high school right to college, or somebody who's maybe been in the workforce and coming back to college. And so I want to go through a number of these common issues and just make sure you know that we're aware they're going on and that we have resources to help with those. The first one is developing new friendships. I think it's nerve-wracking for anybody to go onto a new campus or go into a new classroom and not know your peers as well as you have in the past, in high school, maybe at another college you attended. So please know that we have a number of activities. We have an activities fair. We have get to know you activities in the beginning of every term, so you can meet people and get to know your colleagues, your fellow students, and help that adjustment be a little bit more smooth. Finding a niche is really important for everybody. I think all of us have our passions and our interests, and it's important that you can find people that maybe share some common interests with you, so you have something to talk about, some support. And so in the midst of all those first classes and buying your books, we're also offering first meetings of clubs and organizations and the activities fair, so that you can meet people that might share that interest or a hobby, and you can start to make connections that way too. If there's a hobby or interest that you have and there's not a club here that focuses on that, you also can start a club if you find some other people that share that interest. So there's lots of ways to get involved here at NEC. The adjustment, if you're coming from high school, from going from high school to college level classes, can be dramatic for some people and can be easy for others. It's probably different for everybody. But know that the relationships between teacher and student and managing your workload can be quite different from high school to college. Managing the information in a syllabus, making sure you're on deadlines, working with faculty members who you maybe only see once or twice a week when you're used to maybe seeing high school teachers every day. That's all a different thing. And so I think it's important to reach out to faculty advisors, to your academic staff advisors, or to your peer leader or your first year seminar instructor if you're in a first year seminar for help negotiating that and getting used to the differences from high school to college. Structuring time can be different for a lot of people. Instead of being in high school for 7 or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, going to a system where you might be only in class 14 to 16 hours during the week can be a challenge because there's so much more free time to manage, and there may not be a family member there making sure you're doing your work and managing your schedule, especially if you're living on campus. So it's important to know that that's going to be really important to your success, to think about how to manage that time, to enjoy the flexibility it gives you, but not to lose track of deadlines and lose productivity because you're not managing your time well. And again, our staff is here to help you with that. Our academic advising staff is prepared to do that. Our first year seminar instructors can do that, and our offices can do that. For those of you that are coming from a traditional high school environment or a boarding school environment, you might find a great deal of independence, more than you're used to, especially if you're living on campus. Not having someone make sure you're going to bed at a certain time, make sure you do your homework after class and things like that can be exciting and liberating, but also can be tricky. So I think it's important, again, to use the resources I mentioned to help you manage your time and independence really carefully. And lastly, I just want to encourage everyone to step out of their comfort zone as much as they can, especially during the first 6 weeks of classes. That is a time when relationships are begun and hopefully becoming formed. It's a time when you want to get off to a positive start in your classes, to join in with activities and clubs that interest you, and to really make this place your home, whether you're a commuter or residential student. And I think that means sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone, going to a first meeting of a club and where you don't know anybody, making sure you're going to all your classes, even though it might be kind of awkward at first. So please step out of your comfort zone. Let us know if you need some support while you do that. And we're here rooting for your success for sure. I'll wrap up our time together by just reinforcing the fact that we are available for questions now or during the semester or even in future semesters. Please reach out to us by email, by phone, or in person. And we wish you only the very best as you start your time at NEC, or for parents and families as you send your student to NEC. Thank you.